Introducing the Paramena Bliss Podcast, a show dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of achieving optimal health naturally as you transition into perimenopause and menopause. Get ready to join your host, Dr. Seth Yates, an experienced naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, and kinesiologist, as he shares his wealth of knowledge acquired from over 40,000 patient visits and 15 years in working with perimenopausal females. Welcome to the Paramena Bliss Podcast.
Hey, this is Doc Yates, and welcome to the Paramena Bliss Podcast. And today I want to discuss rosacea. So you might be wondering just exactly what is rosacea. A lot of times it can be confused for acne, and it almost looks like acne slash a rash that kind of most commonly occurs around your cheekbones. Yeah, I guess you would call it cheekbones and the malar area. So the thing is, though, is that it's not actually acne. It's inflammation of the skin and the vessels under the skin. And this is something that has a tendency to flare up during perimenopause and menopause, which is a red flag right away. The moment anything you know consistently flares up during times of hormonal changes, you know that hormones are going to be playing a role. But there's a lot of other things that play a role, and I want to get into that and different treatment strategies for this. So for rosacea, typically from a general medicine standpoint, it's often treated with antibiotics and anti-inflammatory creams. So that tells you a few things, because that does give some results. So that does tell you a few things about what some of the underlying issues might be. So let's go into it. So the first thing you want to do, and this is something that a lot of people are already aware of online, but we got to start with the simple things first, is avoid the triggers. So common triggers for rosacea flares. Now these are not things that's going to make the rosacea go away, but these are the things that is going to help limit the flare-ups that you get. So excess sun, hot drinks, alcohol, caffeine, really spicy foods. And what you notice from that really stands out to me from a Chinese medicine perspective is that these are all heating and warming elements. And one of the things that you will see with perimenopause is that this whole, we've talked about this in a previous podcast, but you have this balance of yin and yang. And yang is heating, excess, things kind of heating up, rising up. Yin is calm, cooling, bringing energy down. And what you see in perimenopause is that you see a decrease in the yin leading to this excess yang. And it will lead, one of the main symptoms of that is flushing in the face. So the fact that it's also all aggravated by these heating elements just further reinforces the idea of the importance of needing to balance yin and yang at the same time, which is why we're eliminating the heating aspects, but to increase the cooling aspects like cooling foods, more hydration, more green vegetables. There's a lot of cooling herbs, but we're going to get into that in another point very soon. Okay, the next thing is that there's a lot of times for myself as a naturopath where I don't necessarily agree with the treatments that they use in general medicine. But this is a situation where I have found that when you're in acute flare, using some like short-term antibiotics and short-term anti-inflammatories is the best thing for pulling down that flare. And then I feel that the strongest role of the naturopathic practitioner or natural medicine is to actually treat some of the underlying imbalances so that you're not getting the flares. But if you're already in an acute flare and you're looking for treatments, still work naturopathically or naturally to correct the underlying issues, but those medications will get you out of that flare faster. Okay, number 3, of course, but since this is the Paramena Bliss podcast, balancing hormones. Hormones plays a huge role in this yin-yang imbalance that we talked about early with the estrogen-progesterone balance. And estrogen and progesterone are both have anti-inflammatories effect in the skin and in the vessels. So it's just check. All of these things play a role, and the timeline of when a lot of this flares up also all fits. So balancing hormones is a key component. Now, it's not going to be the only thing. There's always about doing like a balanced approach, but part of that balance has to be balancing your hormones. Okay, herbal formulations. The best way I find this is to do a combination herbal formulation. So what you want that to do is address many of the different factors that seem to flare up during a rosacea flare. So we use one bottle and we'll use skin herbs. So an example of skin herbs would be, you definitely would want to use something like burdock and rheum palmatum, which is called turkey rhubarb. They're really good for your skin, but they're also cooling. So you need the clear, damp heat, and they're good for your skin. Then you want antihistamine herbs. Good example of that would be a small amounts of something called butterbur and then nettle, because nettle, anytime you can use one herb that has multiple effects. So nettle is anti-inflammatory, nettle reduces histamine, and nettle also is a good herb for detoxifying the skin. Antimicrobial herbs are built into the mix as well. A great one for this would be something called Scutellaria bicalensis or Berberis. Scutellaria bicalensis is something they use in Chinese medicine for clearing this heat. It does a better job. That's usually used to clear heat in the upper half of the body. So that would definitely be built into the formula. And then anti-inflammatory, you could add in a few herbs like boswellia, which you probably heard of before, but it's called frankincense, as in gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So frankincense would be a great anti-inflammatory. You could build into that as well. There's other anti-inflammatories too. For instance, birch extract, but I often don't use that because some people are more prone to birch allergies, so it's just easier to pick one that less people have sensitivities to. Lastly, the diet. So we've already talked about some of the basic triggers, but there's other aspects of diet can play a big role when it comes to the inflammatory part of it. And this is also something we've talked about many times in other podcasts before, but food sensitivities. There are a lot of foods that are technically healthy foods, but they can lead to inflammatory triggers in some people. So identifying these food sensitivities in yourself, and then also sticking to a lower sugar diet. So lower sugar, identify food sensitivities. This on its own can reduce the majority of flares. So if you only did the diet and balanced your hormones, in my experience, that addresses most of it. But the other things really help speed the process up. So I hope this helps give some information on if you're struggling with rosacea and things that you can do to help correct that, get some natural benefits for that. And this is Doc Yates signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paramena Bliss podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and visit paramenobliss.com for more valuable information on how you can thrive during your transition through perimenopause. Join our community of like-minded women who are dedicated to achieving optimal health naturally, and stay up to date with the latest tips, tricks, and advice from Dr. Seth Yates. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Paramena Bliss podcast.